What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. As always, thank you for hanging out with us. My name is Scott Barker. I run partnerships and revenue at Sales Hacker, and we have a cool topic for you today. I love it because it's all backed by very recent data that we did with our friends over at Ambition, a couple other really cool companies, and we did this sort of state of sales performance survey. And so we're going to talk through some of the findings from that today. And the topic is really going to center around this. The top sales KPIs you probably aren't tracking and should be. So before I introduce my awesome guest who's going to run us through everything, a few housekeeping items. So this will be recorded. We've got about 30 minutes of meaty content planned for you, and then probably about 10-15 minutes of Q&A. But it will be sent out after. So if you got to jump off for whatever reason, that's okay. Go close the deal. Go have that deal review, whatever it is. We'll make sure it's in your inbox. You'll actually be getting it from our friends at Ambition, so look out for that. And then secondly, of course, we want this to be for you, the community. So ask questions throughout. We got a lot of content to get through, so we'll probably keep the questions for the end on this particular webinar, but please do get involved. We want to hear from you, and we'll try and get through as many as possible at the end. But we got that all out of the way. I wanted to introduce my good friend, Brian Trautschold, co-founder and COO of Ambition. Brian, welcome, man.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm pumped, man. This is going to be a good one. And so for those of you who...
Real quick.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you, how are you feeling? The biggest day of Canadian history was last week, in my opinion. Are you feeling good right now? Are you still a little bit dazed?
Yeah, it was a big day. I don't know if it was the biggest in Canadian history. We've done some things up here, believe it or not. There was a gold medal hockey game not that too long ago. There was some things, but it was an amazing, amazing experience. Yeah, we had, for those of you who don't know, I am Canadian, over on the West Coast, but it really just consumed the nation for about at least 3 weeks. And we had our Toronto Raptors bring it home. Kawhi's our new boy. And I've been extremely jealous is what it is. I should have kind of bit the bullet and flown over to the other side of the country, because the parades and everything
would have been worth it.
It would have. But it was fun, and we took it home from the U.S. First time in 76 years or something. It's finally in Canada. So yeah, it was fun. Cool, man. Well, yeah, let's dive into this. So also, those who don't know who Ambition is, they're a leading sales performance management and coaching platform. So make sure you check them out. But let's dive into these findings, man. I haven't even had too much time to dive into these myself. So I'm like as equally excited to go through this as I think everyone listening. And I'm going to just try and shut up and take it all in.
All good. That sounds great. And as Scott mentioned, we will share this whole thing out after the fact. We'll also be linking to the actual sales or state of sales performance survey, which we had tons of great both leaders and reps filling out. It's been pretty mind-blowing, in my opinion, to go through the data. And some of it, I think, maybe we expected, but we didn't know that it was prevalent. Some of it was a surprise. So like Scott said, I'm Brian Trautschold. I'm the co-founder and COO at Ambition. We sell software to sales leaders that are serious about building the culture of success around their entire sales org. So I'm going to jump straight in. And there's a recurring theme you're going to hear from me, and you've probably been hearing if you follow us or our content for a while. It's that we're all about metrics, and by no surprise, we teamed up with Sales Hacker and Gong and Factor 8 and Vidyard, and we did this sales performance survey. We had a lot of great questions about not only process and tools, but also the metrics and the alignment of those metrics in organizations. And, if you're not tracking metrics, I don't know where to start with you. I assume you are if you're following the Sales Hacker community. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the surprising things we learned. And, when it comes to, in the moment, on the floor decision making, what make or breaks your number, what make or breaks a rep staying, leaving, performing highly. How do you pull that data out of what you're doing and what you have to maximize that success and create a culture around it? This used to be, cash rules everything around me. Now it's data rules everything around me. And, we're seeing this broadly across the entire industry. We live in a time where, as a sales leader, as a sales ops person, as a manager, there is unfettered access to information, what your reps are doing, how their emails are performing, how their calls are converting, what their ops are doing. The data really is unlimited. The challenge is that the context, the time, and the actionability from that data is harder than ever, because if you're a manager, you've got nonstop reporting, stream of conscious updates coming to you, and how you use that to effectively coach, manage, change the outcome for your team is ultimately what's going to move the needle from you. And the data back that up. And I think the first stunning thing that we've learned is how much time sales leaders are spending in reporting or in analysis type activities. So we actually started to get a little bit of data around this a few months ago when we released our Salesforce KPI report. But both this and our recent sales performance survey showed that sales leaders on average are spending 10 to 12 hours per week wading through Salesforce reports, Excel, dashboards. And that's just staggering because, if you're like me, I don't know how many hours you have in a week, but if you're doing 10 to 12 per week, you've got about 40 to 45 hours per month tied up in reporting, looking at spreadsheets. And I don't think it's, a giant leap to get to that. Time could be better spent talking to reps, being on calls, doing a coaching session, doing a training. And that's what we found as we dug into why people are performing at less than ideal levels. One thing before I move forward that we found out in the survey was that only 20% of sales leaders said that more than 75% of their team was hitting goal. And let me say that again because it was surprising to me. So one in five sales leaders who responded to our survey said that more than 75% of their team is hitting goal or on target to hit goal. And when I look at that type of staggering number, that means 80% of folks are not, 80% of leaders folks are not on target to hit goal. And then I look at another, corollary stat that says 10 to 12 hours per week are looking at reports, not coaching, not sitting on calls, not training. I start to think that we may have a problem and we may have some issues in our industry. The good news is, something we found is that when we talk about what matters, what actually matters to the sales leader, what matters to the sales reps, we have really high alignment. I think that most folks are doing a good job communicating what we care about first and foremost. These are things like revenue generated, pipeline generated, ops created from a sales leader KPI standpoint. From a rep standpoint, you're seeing very similar, I think, close metrics, things that they want to be obviously recognized for. And that's really key because we're going to come back to this alignment thing very quickly. Because when we surveyed reps, 32% said visibility into numbers is what gets them most fired up to sell. And this was really surprising to me. The classic thing is reps are coin operated, or reps are just here for the commission, or, whoever has the best variable compensation plan is going to get the best reps. And, the majority of folks, or the by and large, largest response to this was not about hitting quota, making President's Club, making a ton of money, any of that stuff, which there were options like that. It was visibility into the numbers, which I think speaks to reps today in a modern sales organization and in the dozens of folks that we talk to, they want to be aligned to the organizational goals, their team goals, and they want to be contributing to the goals and objectives of that unit. And when they don't feel that, and they don't think that they're aligned, they don't have that visibility, they're not nearly as motivated. Another interesting stat that came out of this survey, which to me is shocking because I think this is easily solved for today, but over 30% of reps don't get visibility into their performance on a daily basis. And some folks may say, well, how is that possible? We have all this data, we have all this reports, we've got this stuff everywhere. You know, the reality is that most of this is either siloed to leadership, or folks are only looking at it on a weekly, monthly, worst case quarterly basis. That really shocked me. Another third, 30% of the folks we surveyed said they only do performance insights once a quarter. And so you've got a modern organization, you've got all these great tools in the market that we think we're a part of a phenomenal ecosystem right now, but there's 30% of reps out there who are only seeing their performance, how they're doing, where they stack up versus those goals on a quarterly basis. Obviously, if you're a sales leader out there, you're thinking, how do I course correct? How do I coach people? How do I get people aligned to that visibility if you're only seeing it, you know, once every 90 days, 4 times a year, which is even a scarier way to think about it. So here's where we have some work to do, we think. In order to ensure you're making the most of your data to make the sales numbers more visible to your reps, sales leaders have to decide first what matters. And this is, like I said, we think there's good alignment here, but every time we work with a new client, we have to go through the same exercise. I'm going to talk about kind of the 3 phases we walk through. I'll try to do it quickly. I know we want to get to questions, but I'll take a little bit of time on each section. Top line revenue goals are great. Most people can tell us that pretty quickly for any role or any specific team. But what happens on the sales floor in real time is ultimately the thing that's going to crush your quota. So, you know, we're going to talk about 3 different types of performance metrics you should be working toward, how to set benchmarks that will in turn help you to determine what those KPIs should be for your business. And then we're going to look at some concrete examples of companies setting attainable, actionable goals to keep their reps and their team motivated and make that success repeatable. And we'll take some questions at the end, and we'll share this content once again at the end. I'll have a number for you guys to text, so stay tuned or wait for the recording to come out. Let's talk about the metrics that matter. Let's dive right in, and we'll talk about the top of the funnel first. So increasingly, we're seeing sales become more segmented. We're seeing sales become more role-based. So that means on a day-to-day as well as a goal and outcomes level, people are focused in different sections. So that's you're a sales development rep, you're a leader of sales development reps, whether you have inside salespeople or account executives, even if you have cross-sell, upsell folks, field reps, hybrid folks, whatever, everyone kind of is starting to, I would say, specialize in their own funnel. And at the top of that funnel are the activity metrics that people do every day, what we call the hustle metrics. Folks have control about these. They can pick up the phone, they can send an email, they can walk into a prospect's office. And these are the things people are living and breathing every day. And I think typically folks have a decent understanding of these, but they sometimes don't understand what these really mean are their leading indicators. So, you know, not only do I care whether or not, you know, Scott, a rep here, does the 60 calls, but I need to make sure he's doing it every day, and he's setting meetings, and he's getting demos, et cetera. All the things at the top of the funnel that lead to success. We're going to talk about why this matters and what the survey found in 2 steps. The next chunk of our funnel is the objective sales metrics. So these are more of the, you know, long-term outcomes that really lead to the ultimate goals. This could be things like revenue, growth of accounts, closed-won deals. We like to call them destination metrics. What are these? When all weighted against each other, they're going to add up to overall success for whatever the role the person's in. And I think a generation ago, call it 5-10 years ago, less tools, less data maybe, this was where people focused. What did you do versus quota? How much revenue did you sell? how much margin did you contribute, things like that. But as we said before, we now see a really important third category of metrics, and we're going to give you guys some examples to take home with you. So we call these Moneyball sales metrics. If you don't know the movie, I think it's Jonah Hill's best work. The book originally is, thank you, Scott. It's by Michael Lewis, and it's all about an interesting story that's a real world story in baseball. You don't have to follow baseball to get the picture here, but the Oakland Athletics team and their GM, Billy Beane, who's kind of a famous character at this point because of this revolution, they started using statistical analysis they found, and they started to break away scouting and player evaluation just from things like speed or contact or things like typical baseball scouts were looking at, and they started looking at things like on-base percentage were actually a better indicator of success and actually generated more points. And what they really, got to, and you could watch the movie, you don't have to, is they started looking at who were the most effective baseball players, not just who looked good on paper, not who sounded good on a demo, if you will, who hit the ball and it sounded nice, but who actually got on base because, surprising to folks who don't care about baseball, but the more people who are on base, the higher chances they're going to score runs. And we think this is incredibly applicable to sales today, and the survey backed this up. Effectively, we believe Moneyball metrics are, they reveal the critical value for sales coaches, GMs, looking to assess, align, optimize their teams to be as efficient and effective as possible. And the good news is that, these metrics, no matter what your organization is doing, you can always find the conversion rate and focus on that effectiveness through the funnel, which is important because you don't have to tell a story about quantity. You can start talking about quality, how we do things, and how to improve. So some examples that I think are great to look at. Just right off the bat, it doesn't matter the organization, but imagine you're in an inside sales role, heavily in front of a computer or phone like so many of us are today. One would be how many calls turn into conversations. This is actually surprisingly drastically different across industries. It's drastically different across the sequence or the cadence style that people use. But typically, it starts at a baseline in an organization, but based on tweaking, working over time, you can increase how many calls turn into a conversation or turn into a conversation. The next piece of that funnel that we look at, or that I think is a good example, is once you've honed in on how many average conversations you should generate from X number of calls, you start to look at the quality and the effectiveness of that conversation, and you turn it into a coaching and a leverage moment. How many of those conversations that a rep has on a daily basis turn into a scheduled meeting? Or maybe if you're in a higher volume environment, how many have a positive disposition, aka a positive next step coming off of the call? That's going to tell you right away as a manager, and we're seeing this in the survey, that folks that we think are pretty clever are not only saying how many calls did we make, how many conversations did I have, but if I had 10 conversations, what percentage are turning into the step that I want? And when I look across my whole team, who is doing that at a higher rate than others, and what are they doing to have those effective conversations? And last but not least, to kind of complete the example here, how many of those scheduled meetings end up in a qualified sales lead or an opportunity or whatever the next thing is in your organization? It doesn't have to be high velocity or high volume, but you can get a sense that as we looked at that, very qualitative funnel there, we could hone in on who's doing the best. Why is someone having more connects or answers than someone else? Why is someone having more positive conversations and scheduled meetings than someone else? And then from those scheduled meetings, does someone have a drastically higher rate of ops-created qualified meetings? Whenever that we see that, I would say, spike in the data or someone way outside the realm of what other folks are doing, like Billy Beane, we want to hone in and say, what is this person doing differently? Can we replicate that? Can we create a culture of that around our team? Because, for us, we're thinking, how do we get on base more? How do we score more runs? To do that, we start building KPIs and benchmarks into the organization. We set the expectation. We go find what the average is, and then we use the Moneyball analogy. We say, okay, now we have the average. How do we get above the average? What can we train, teach, hire for, emphasize to really bring clarity and priority so that the team is taking time to figure out what they need to do, how they can improve their benchmarking baseline. And we'll start from the back, because I think sometimes it's intimidating for a company like us who deals with, hundreds of companies, all with 20 to 40 sales metrics, whatever the case may be, and you're saying, oh, this is easy for you, but I just have 2 or 3 things I care about now. I don't know where to go from here. We hear that all the time. This is my example, and I've written this on, 25 whiteboards in the last year. So I'm going to go through it quickly, but I think you guys can all copy this and replicate it. It starts with if you're a sales org, it starts with the prime directive. What's the big number at the top of the food chain, if you will? The CEO told the board or the team or the shareholders, we're going to go do X this quarter, this year. Then break it down to the next chunk. How does that relate to my business unit or my location or my region? So I'm taking the big number, I'm slicing it into my piece of the pie. Then you break that into the team. So I have a team in our product X category. I've got 10 members. What is each person on my team, or each hypothetical person, may already have them, what are they responsible to do to help us hit our slice? And then you want to back up the last level and say, okay, now that we have everyone on board with their piece of the pie, typically that's called quota, how do we activate them to go do it? And this is about getting that baseline and then getting people above it. So once again, you start with your North Star number, and we're going to work forward from there. And it's an important note that, I think that as sales is evolving, how quickly and how rapidly we look at this definitely changes. So, it used to be we'd look at it annually. Sometimes we're looking at it quarterly. Different organizations are going to look at it monthly. Very high volume organizations have to look at it even more regularly. Another thing we found that I want to bring up, because, some organizations have the capacity to see this right now. I hope that more will have it in the near future, but sales really is evolving. The performance survey showed this. A whopping 66% of sales teams that we surveyed track customer satisfaction, or CSAT, as their top KPI, edging out team quota. And that was pretty surprising, because I think not only do you want great volume folks, great effectiveness folks, but you've got to figure out what makes the customer actually respond to a rep, and who is doing their process in a way that the customer responds to. And so it's not just solely about your number. It's about making the customer feel really good. And I don't want to leave that behind when people are saying KPI, KPI, KPI. You do have to listen to the customer and make sure they feel, actually, I should say, they don't feel like they're in a process. They feel like this is a partnership, and they're working through it with you. So start with that North Star number, work backwards through what we call the opportunity stages. This could be different in different orgs. It could be different if you have SDRs. But, you want to go through, how do I get each of these lagging indicators that get me to, for example, a closed won opportunity or a qualified meeting if I'm an SDR. Next, and you could do this on a whiteboard, you could do it on an Excel sheet, calculate the conversion for the average. So if I've got 10 reps and I'm looking at hopefully a quarter or 2 quarters worth of data, I can say we made 10,000 calls, we had 1,000 conversations, we had XYZ number of positive conversations, demo set, etc. You want to track that, and you're basically saying, here is our historical number. Here's the reality that I can expect from folks to do. And hopefully you find a couple areas that you say, you know what, I'm a little bit more ambitious than this. I think that we can do better. Let's just use a random one that I think is a good leverage point. I think we could have better than 20% positive disposition on calls. If that's like the third conversion step in there, we see that the coaching on calls is becoming a critical space for folks. It seems like a great area to add leverage. If I can get that from 20% positive disposition to 40%, I've got a ton more meetings that I can go sell and try to turn into opportunities. So, just as a sales leader to all of you sales leaders out there, what I'm thinking about is how do I make sure we're calling more qualified people? How do I make sure that we are telling the right story, asking the right questions on the phone? And then do I have great coaching and great, continuing education on making sure our reps are continually learning and they're not pitching the way we pitched 6 months ago. They're learning the best practices continually in an agile format. Last but not least, determine what gives people the right nudge to move forward in the sales process. And you've got to define those activities that are going to drive the conversion. I'm going to give an example here in a second, but the more public, the more visible you can make these, the better. This is a great example because Global Trans is a great customer of ours. We love these folks who are on site with them in Salt Lake City about a month ago, and they have a very high velocity case in their organization. They create a ton of leads at the top of the funnel, and they've got to really move on those folks daily to convert them into transactions tomorrow, this week. And when we talked to Cam, who manages sales operations and all of the SDRs there, we realized that she is really looking at this in a proactive, on-the-fly way. So she said to us, I need X number of meetings booked every month. She's saying that she needs this many calls dialed every morning because she knows how many of her calls convert to meetings. And so it's not just, hey, I got to get 20 meetings set per rep this month. She knows that she needs this many calls. And actually what's not on the slide is she told us she needs it by lunch. So she can tell if they're having a great day by lunch, depending on the level of activity folks are doing, because she's that honed in on her conversion rate. And when she doesn't see the activity, what she does is she starts to push out incentives and push out content and a little bit of motivation to the team immediately to try to ramp up that activity in real time. So she is not waiting for tomorrow or Friday or the last day of the month to say, man, we really let it slack 15 days ago. She's doing it in the moment, and she's doing that with very specific, very customized data to their organization. All right, so now every rep ideally knows what they need to do. You have these activities, these objectives. You have a ambitious set of effectiveness or conversion rates between these different stages. How do you actually hold these folks accountable to the KPIs and the useful conversion metrics that get real results? No one wants to feel like Big Brother, and everyone on this call knows that the virtual or sometimes if you're in the field, the literal beating of the pavement in sales can start to feel like a real grind. I know all my SDR leaders understand that. The best folks in what we call the modern sales leaders today are not only motivating, I talk a lot about inspiring reps to create a culture that yields better results. And they're not doing that with an iron fist or a thumb on top of you, because I think that ultimately is going to burn people out. They're trying to focus on what we think of as 3 areas of goal or performance management to ensure your team stays on board with both the daily activities and ultimately the goals and objectives to hit those. So step 1, and I actually wrote this down. I was rereading the performance survey during lunch today. You've got to have goals that are attainable. So if you're a sales leader who's got goals that they know folks can't hit, you're starting at a disadvantage. What shocked me from the survey was that over 10%, I think it's about 12% of leaders admitted the biggest factor causing reps to miss goals was that they were unattainable. So 1 in 10 folks are just saying, yeah, I'm challenging these people to hit these every day. I'm managing, I'm coaching from it, but I know they can't do it. That to me is crazy. That's something we have to change in our culture. But take this away from the call and try to figure that out. Very quickly, We emphasize, we ask people to set SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. I'm not going to dive into it. I talked about it a lot. You can read it on the slide afterward. But what's more important is you got to make it visible. As I said early, visibility was the number one motivating factor of the reps we polled. Being able to understand and visualize how they're progressing toward their goal, how they compare to their peers, and how the whole group is delivering value and pushing up the number together is really critical. So you've got to put these out in a way that people can see, learn from, and understand the key drivers from. I have a great friend in the AISP community. AISP is one of the sponsors of the Sales Performance Management Survey, Paula White. She had a 24-hour delay in the reporting on her call volume. She works in a much higher volume organization where they're doing a lot of calls. They're doing distribution, actually, she likes to tell me, which is a little bit different than your typical sales organization. And so her insights to call volume lagged by 24 hours. It meant she was a full day behind when it came to knowing if her team was on pace or if they're behind or if they need some type of inspiration, motivation, course correction. What she did was give her team nonstop access to numbers, both individually with scorecards on all the KPIs that they matter, as well as publicly on TVs that really channeled the focus of, oh man, we're behind, or great, we're beating it, let's push it even further. The results were pretty staggering. For Boundtree, like I said, they had an incredible shift by increasing call volume 38%, which is actually a metric that they set some quota on. The visibility to those personal goals, the KPIs, the activities, the objectives, those weren't the only thing. What she described is allowed everyone to track alongside simultaneously and have this shared peer-to-peer responsibility for the success and the health of their groups. And what I think about as a leader, and I'm sure folks on this call understand this, is that you want to increase this group accountability. You don't want to be the only guy, if we're using a basketball or baseball reference, in the dugout or on the bench who's yelling. You want everyone else bought in. And when you put these things out there and create this visibility like Paula did, the recognition not only feels good, but your reps are also all on the same team and they're all focused on hitting the goals together. We had another piece of content that came out a few months ago, the Salesforce KPI report. And, sales leaders have more access to data than ever. So does your customer. And they seek referrals from one another. And this goes back to the qualitative aspect. They want to seek positive reviews. They want to seek peer-to-peer recognition. They want to see that other folks have been satisfied in using your service, your product, whatever. And the same thing is true of your team. Keeping the reps motivated, keeping those stories happening, creates a 24/7 kumbaya. Sometimes you need the good and healthy competition. Sometimes you need to make sure everyone else sees that success is possible, it's attainable, and you can go do it. And we think the customers want the same thing. The last thing is making goals competitive. It's certainly not the most important, but I think it's not the least important either. Salespeople typically tend to have a desire to win. They don't have to. They could be team first, which is amazing, like Scott's guy, Mark Gasol. But they should want to beat their competitors. Hopefully they want to beat some of their peers in the organization. And hopefully they want to beat their past goal. All of us with Apple Watches on or Fitbits, we're doing the same thing. We set targets for ourselves, and I really want to beat that target every week. You can tap into this loss aversion kind of phenomenon, as I think of it, and that brings a lot of energy to your sales floor. It's going to bring a second layer of motivation to your team, and it doesn't just have to be lone wolf. Who can win this? Who's the number one person? It could also be a message of don't let yourself down. I think we see that quite a bit in the survey. And a great example is our friends at Domain Base. I actually met with Jay a few weeks ago, and they came to us with a problem that I think is really, really common in the sales development world. And I'm going to talk about how they use competition to address and ultimately change that paradigm in their organization. The sales development reps at Demandbase relied too heavily on emailing for their outbound initiatives. So when they're trying to set meetings, trying to create new pipeline, everything was email. And what Jay and the leadership team knew there was based on historical data that calls actually produced more qualified leads more quickly. I don't think it's a secret to anyone on here that cold calling can be a little bit challenging. Some folks are a little bit uncomfortable or have anxiety about doing it. And so, Jay had to figure out a way to change the paradigm, change the behavior, and get everyone to do it in a somewhat of a comfortable, high adoption way. And to get buy-in from his SDRs, he wanted to quickly show them how many more opportunities they could drive by focusing on the right, or at least the more effective activity. He worked with a team of managers there for the SDR team to build what we call fantasy football team contests. So they use TVs, they use multi-metric scorecards, dashboards that everyone had right in front of them for the visibility. He was very upfront with, we're trying to go to X. Here's our goal. Here's what we're trying to achieve. You're all a part of it. And over the course of about 11 weeks, his 25 SDRs competed on 3 teams. So they're each vying for the highest weekly score on those scorecards. And meetings were set by the calls had the most heavily weighted point structure, if you will, to help instill that right behavior. So reinforce that we really care about meetings generated by calls. And what's I think incredible, and I think that this is very common for organizations trying to transform or change behavior, is that the results were, staggering. When they changed the visibility, when they changed the incentive structure, the team of 25 folks followed it. So they had a 31x increase in meetings. They increased voicemails by 16x, call connects by 7.5x, and they had an insane meeting number. And so it wasn't just by running a contest. Who can set the most meetings? That's 1.0 competition or 1.0 sales management. 2.0 is getting everyone involved, creating a recurring system, 11 weeks, basically a whole quarter, where they're focused on, visibility, peer-to-peer competition, rewards, and properly weighting those activities to encourage and actually refocus the sellers. And the last corollary I'm gonna talk about before we get into some questions is you've got to create a multiple metric and a very clear incentive structure to avoid the Cobra effect. I'm sure Scott knows about this. I'm not sure how many other folks on here have heard about the Cobra effect, but it's a story from the British colonial rule of India. So there was a snake problem in India when the British were there. And what they did was they put a bounty on every dead cobra that a person would bring in. And so you get paid for dead cobras. They set a really clear incentive, right? They say, bring us a cobra, get some money. The problem is that people started breeding cobras and then killing them and then taking them to Earth. So now they're farming cobras and they have even more. And the problem gets worse. So not only do they start by incentivizing the wrong thing, then they go one level deeper. The British catch on. They say, no more bounties, no more money for these cobras. And what happens is that all these people just got rid of them. So now they have more cobras because they've been breeding them. They have no incentive to kill them and bring them in. And so they created an unintended worse consequence to the problem they were, initially trying to solve. And I think every sales leader has had, one of these incentives or a contest or an idea with a goal where, hey, I'm going to try something. Oh, it's not really working. Let me revert back. And now you've got people who are all over the place and confused, frustrated, whatever. You've got to put a little bit of extra thought on the front end and think through how are we really going to incentivize the right behavior and how are we going to make sure that we prove what we want to our team. I think Jay did a great job because he emphasized the importance of meetings set based on calls dialed. So he didn't just say who can make the most calls, who can do the most dials. He didn't just say who can do the most meetings. He really was very specific. He did it in a fair peer-to-peer way And he ran it for a long time to really instill that this is how we're going to do it at demand-based going forward. And he got the results that he hoped for. A few quick things about incentives. Don't forget the biggest growth on our team is going to be from activating the middle 70% of your performers. Everyone loves to reward, celebrate, talk about our top tier, our A players. That's great. But there's typically only 10 to 15% of them. So if you've got 100 reps, you've got 10, 15 folks who are at the top. You've got 70 folks in the middle. If you can figure out a way to get their wheels turning, get them cranking on not only the right activity, but higher conversion rate, you're going to get a lot of juice there, especially because if you consider the top 10% or 10 to 15 people, probably already pretty good at what they're doing. There may only be so much extra leverage to squeeze out of them. One thing, this is a great incentive I've seen recently. A few companies are doing this. Consider a raffle. So one entry per activity or per unit that you want to reward the frequency of that valuable behavior or the frequency of that valuable outcome. So it really starts to drive, the more you do, the more tickets you have in the raffle. Another thing that I think can help with this is, the 70%, the bottom 10 to 15%, all those folks, what you really want is to get them into the B and A level. So consider focusing on a percentage increase or a delta in their performance as the primary reward system to a contest or on a leaderboard or some type of report or recognition cadence that you have. That way you get people not just thinking about, I can't ever win this contest because I don't do the most revenue. I can't ever win this contest because I don't set the most meetings. I could win the contest because I have the biggest improvement in my performance from this month to versus last month, or for last month versus this quarter. I think it's a really great way to activate those folks who are maybe not at the top level of performance. Almost done. In closing, a few of the things we found. Number one, I think everyone can take away what I thought was staggering is that reps crave visibility into the numbers. Giving them a real-time insight is critical. Giving them real alignment into the organization is what really generates that excitement and ultimately what, as they say, gets them motivated in the morning. When it comes to goals, KPIs, benchmarks, expectations, guessing is going to be a losing game. Do not hide this from reps. Do not try to sugarcoat it. Tell them what it is. Make sure they know. Give them visibility to see their performance and their attainment. Similar to their first point, alignment on the North Star number is key, but you've got to break down, the individual, not only quota, KPIs that are relevant and achievable from there. Prioritize what your reps can control. They can control how effective they are on the phone. They can control how effective how high quality the leads they attack are if they're outbound. And they can obviously control what they say. Weight the activities for impact. Don't just focus on who can make the most calls, who can have the most meetings generated from a call, for example, like Jay. And last but not least, sales teams are human. Treat them with respect. Give them what I think about as responsibility, visibility, and they're going to create happy customers. It's not just about grind. Your reputation is out there in the market, and you want your folks to treat their leads, their prospects, their opportunities like people too. And you've got to do that by empowering them and having empathy with them as well. I've said a few times on here, we're going to share all of this. I'd love for you guys to get it right now. We'll send it to you via email. It has some amazing partners. We did a lot of good research here, and I'm really proud of all the folks who came together. If you text SPM survey to 345-345, you can get this. We're also going to share that Salesforce KPI study that we did. So you can get the deck, you can get the recording, and obviously you can get the whole sales performance survey for yourself. All you have to do is text SPM survey to 345-345. In my opinion, I want you guys to do this and you guys to have the information. Me talking about it's great. You guys spending a lunch hour reading that thing is way more impactful. So love for you guys to have that in your inbox today. And I hope I got a little bit of time left. Scott, tell me how we did.
Did awesome, man. That was awesome. So make sure everyone you text that I've got a hold of it. I'm excited to dive into it further, especially after getting that presentation, man. That was awesome. And yeah, we've probably got about like 5 minutes or so for some questions. And right at the get-go, so we've got a question here that I really like, and it's about visibility into numbers. And the question is, do you think that it's just about where reps stand against their goals and quota? Or do you think reps also create like the visibility into where their quota is coming from, how the organization is actually breaking down those numbers?
Yeah, I think the context is really key. I think, and I think the survey proves that out, in that folks want to know, not only how they're contributing to their number, their attainment. Like I said, once per month or once per quarter is, I think, disastrous. But they should really have a firm sense of, if we're an SDR team and you're telling me I need to generate 20 meetings per month, well, why? How do I fit in? How does my success and hard work contribute to the overall goal of our team? And then I think it was really powerful using that same example, is if you're saying that SDRs here need to create 100 qualified meetings per month, tell your team, here's why we need to do that. It's because we have reps on the account executive side, and they have whatever the number is, a 30% close rate. So for them to go in and hit quota, or for them to generate the revenue and pipeline that they need, here's what we need to supply them. And some folks will talk about, the service level agreement between SDR and AE, or marketing and sales. Like, that to me is over the top. I think you can have a really simple conversation as a leader with your team and say, the reason that we need to generate X is because this group's counting on us, and we're going to go do it for them. And I think it gives people that agency and that accountability to the greater goal. And sometimes I think to their peers. If you got the AE team sitting across the hall or in the other office or whatever, you should know that you're contributing to help them, and they need you.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. And then another really good question here is, it's more of a clarifying question around one of the KPIs that you mentioned, that was calls into conversations. At Ambition, how do you define conversation? Is it a certain way?
So we can do both, and we've seen a variety of ways that we want this to go. For us, if it's a sales development call, if it's a first call, it's really rare that should be like less than 30 seconds. It's kind of like you want to have a little bit of conversation there. It also, we don't want to incentivize those folks to make that like a long call. There's like a sweet spot of like, I interrupted someone's day. They were not expecting my call. Let me figure out, if they have any interest in talking to us, if they do need sales coaching, sales management, TV leaderboards. If they don't, let me get them off the phone, because the last thing they wanted to get was Brian Trautschold hitting them up, on their way to work. But we use outreach for that. So we make sure we have all this data coming into Salesforce, and on every SDR and on the AEs who also do cold calls here, they can see, here's my conversion from calls to conversation to meetings. And so that's data we're getting, from a tool like Outreach, which folks can replicate.
Nice. Awesome. And all right, one more question. This is from Gina. Gina, thanks for the question. So our company rewards output, which in my team's case is delivery against their numerical target quota. How realistic is this as a measure for performance without breaking it down into leading activities such as calls, meetings, and qualified leads?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm trying to read it. I just opened it up as well. It's a little bit long. I think she needs to get to that next level. Because I think it's too hard to manage against just one number. And you see this in sports, right? Like, everyone is talking about your guy Kawhi. He's not just great at one thing. He's great at rebounds and steals. He's great on his defensive metrics. He's great on his shooting percentages. All of that, all of that stuff has been talked about nonstop on the sports shows for the last few days. And I think it's really important. Like, if you've got one number, numerical target, which is their quota, I think that's too, I guess I would say that's too slow of a number. And that, by slow, I mean, you're really only looking at that on a, probably a much longer term basis. And if you're anything like us who sell enterprise software, that's kind of a grind throughout the year, and the last 6 months of the year starts to really increase. You don't want to have zero visibility for 6 months that people are off pace to creating enough opportunities, generating enough pipeline, doing these things that are going to ultimately lead to a successful year, which is quota attainment. So I think it's too slow to just look at, did someone hit quota? Yes, no, maybe, and that's it.
Totally. I agree. And another way to kind of just say exactly what you said there is I look at it as if you're looking at one number and it just doesn't allow you to be fast enough in your prescription, right? It's like if you're a doctor and someone comes in and tells you, I have this one symptom, and that's all they tell you, versus coming in and being like, hey, I have here are these 10 little nuanced symptoms that I have going on. And then you'd be like, oh, let's focus on this. And then you're going to be able to get to, diagnosing what's wrong quicker versus waiting till the end and then you're out.
Yeah, I'm sure people remember this. Before Google Maps, you would look at a map and you'd say, hey, I'm going here, and you check every few minutes to make sure you're on the right road or that you didn't miss the turn or the exit. Can you imagine doing that for your sales number for the year? Like, hey, I'm going to drive to Scott in Vancouver. And then I never look at the map for the next 18 days. Like, what are the odds that I'm going to actually make it there? Probably not great. I'm going to forget something or miss a turn along the way. So I need that consistency. I need some accountability. I think there's some good systems to help you guys do that, whether it's something like us or even like spreadsheets and just really clear, accountable reporting.
Totally. Awesome, Brian. Well, thank you as always for hanging out with me. You always have a ton of knowledge. That was super enjoyable. And yeah, everyone will get that recording sent out and make sure you get this State of Sales Performance Survey. And thank you all for hanging out with us.